and everyone should be on board with equality of opportunity. And he is describing helpfully a way to go to a great extent with that. The summer of 2020, where we saw massive protests, some devolving into riots all over the country, sparked, of course, by the death of George Floyd, and then pushed by organizations like BLM, Black Lives Matter, you started to see a huge uptick in DEI programs, departments, and initiatives, especially across Fortune 500, Fortune 100 businesses, the educational sphere. You started seeing this promoted at very high levels inside the government, especially after the transition of power to Joe Biden. And DEI really took off, and there was a massive spike, like somewhere between 50 to 70% spike in DEI professionals being hired into all kinds of workplaces. And if you don't know, DEI stands for diversity, equity, and inclusion. And this really caused a lot of controversy. And one of the reasons is that the ideas of diversity and inclusion, and even equity at some level, ring true for most people, that of course we should value that and want that, maybe even become more educated in that, so that we can have the best and most powerful working environments possible. At the same time, within the fabric of America, there is the idea of meritocracy, which is earning what you get. This is an ideal that goes all the way back to the foundings of the country. Some would say it's a very Western notion, but those people have not paid much attention to the way the rest of the world tends to function. On an Eastern worldview, it is true that people think more collectively than individualistically, but that does not mean that they erase a meritocracy from their cultures altogether. And in fact, you just don't see evidence of that. And so the problem, as these began to be implemented, is you would see leaks from DEI trainings all over the country and really all over the world. You would see leaks from university DEI trainings, from Coca-Cola. There was one from government interventions. People in the army and military were leaking. Here's what we learned in our DEI training today. And much of it was just based on Marxist principles of oppressor versus oppressed. And much of it was targeting white people and white guilt and white privilege as the main problem inside of the workforce and inside America more broadly. And there was a lot of pushback to this. You not only saw this being trained into the corporate structure here in America, you also started seeing its initiatives being spelled out across film and media. And there was a big backlash to this. There was a huge backlash to the idea that we were going to teach things like critical race theory in our schools and teach our 7-year-old white kids that they are the oppressors and they're inherently bad and they're racist. And if they deny that they're racist, it's just further proof that they are so blind to their own racism that they can't even spot it. ABC News has a piece on this. It says how corporate America is slashing DEI workers amid backlash to diversity programs. Now, ABC News, which is under the parent company of Disney, is very pro DEI and DEI initiatives. And so they're reporting on this. And even if they have a certain slant to it, they're laying out the facts pretty well. It says years after the death of George Floyd, trying to spotlight on social inequities, diversity professionals say some companies are turning their backs on the progress that's been made to address them. Madison Butler is one of the many diversity, equity, and inclusion professionals that companies previously brought on their payroll to ensure their business is equitable and accessible for people of all backgrounds. But in recent months, Butler said she has found it increasingly hard to find work, and she's not alone. DEI positions have been disproportionately hit by layoffs across industries, but particularly at tech companies, which have faced financial challenges as sales slowed from the blistering pace attained during the pandemic. These jobs are being slashed. Sometimes entire departments are being deleted. We saw this in a really startling way when Elon Musk bought Twitter. He went into the closets at Twitter headquarters, found boxes of shirts that said "Stay woke" with the little, Twitter bird on there. He basically completely cut all of the DEI offices and departments. And if you read the newest biography on Elon Musk, what you find is he does not believe in this. And this came to a head in an argument on Twitter with fellow billionaire Mark Cuban. And so if we look at this, it shows Elon Musk saying discrimination on the basis of race, which DEI does, is literally the definition of racism. Now, the reason that he says this is specifically because of the word equity. And what we have to do is try and understand the differentiation between the idea of equity and the idea of equality. We have in our laws in America non-discrimination policies. Everyone has to have it. I'm the leader of a church, which is by IRS standards, a 501c3 nonprofit. We have to have this in our own handbooks, non-discrimination, to ensure equality of hiring practices. You cannot discriminate in who you hire. And so that already exists. Equity goes a step further and tries to ensure not just equality of opportunity, but it tries to ensure equality of outcome. And equality of outcome often looks like some kind of quota to hit or some kind of measurement, not just if everyone had the same opportunities and then in a meritocratic system, the best people were hired because they're the best, but that you have an equal opportunity. And then on top of that, you add a layer of focused individualization to ensure not necessarily that the most qualified or the person who merits the positions, but that you have an equal outcome among all different demographics and all differences. And so in a very real sense, what Elon Musk is saying is if you have 10 people apply and you're hiring for 2 positions and the 2 absolute best people by merit are both white, like hands down, there's an equal opportunity and the 2 best people are white and you don't hire one of them, then that is literally, he says, the definition of racism. And Mark Cuban definitely takes an issue with this. And he lays out a very long thread on X, formerly Twitter. We're not going to go through all of it. Let me help you out and give you my thoughts on DEI. Number 1, diversity. Good businesses look where others don't to find the employees that will put your business in the best possible position to succeed. I don't have any problem with that. I don't think Elon Musk would. You may not agree, but I take it as a given that there are people of various races, ethnicities, orientation, et cetera, that are regularly excluded from hiring consideration. By extending our hiring search to include them, we can find people that are more qualified. The loss of DEI-phobic companies is my gain. Now, what he's describing here is not someone who is practicing DEI. What he's describing is someone who is truly creating equality of opportunity. He goes on to talk about equity. Treating people equally does not mean treating them the same. I made the mistake for a lot of years thinking it did. Equity is a core principle of business. Put your employees in a position to succeed, recognize their difference, and play to their strengths. Inclusion. One of my favorite sayings is that great employees reduce the stress of those around them. Great companies create environments that reduce unnecessary stress of their employees. I'm not talking hitting quota or getting the product out of the door type of stress, which in turn increases productivity. That is what inclusion is all about, making all employees, no matter who they are or how they see themselves, feel comfortable in their environment and able to do their jobs. That is also not describing diversity, equity, inclusion as it's implemented in companies today. That's describing creating a great working culture for all people to have an equal opportunity to succeed. He even specifically says, I'm not talking about hitting quotas, right? So he's just having a different conversation. He talks about why DEI is like healthcare. I didn't fully understand that tweet. So what's the conclusion? If you don't think there is a need for DEI and it doesn't create a competitive advantage for your company, then just look at the X post replies and quotes below. These are the same people that work for you or are your coworkers. Everyone is entitled to their point of view, but these same feelings, even if they are not said out loud, are heard loud and clear at work. Now, I think Mark Cuban thought all the replies were going to be on his side. They're just not. Many people are pointing out that what he's describing is not DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion. What he's describing is diversity, which we all agree and should agree, unless we have some kind of bias that you need to deal with, is a very good thing. Diversity of thought, diversity of life experience, diversity of perspective, diversity of gender, all of those things are needed in an organization. And he's talking about inclusion, which comes from creating healthy work environments, healthy cultures. Everyone should be focusing on that, and every good leader will build that. And if they don't build that, their employees will leave and go to a culture that is healthy. And then he's just describing equality. And everyone should be on board with equality of opportunity. And he is describing helpfully a way to go to a great extent with that, which he's saying you got to go to other places. You got to broaden your scope of recruitment. You have to go into areas maybe you're not super comfortable with. You have to expand your own life experience. You have to get to know people who aren't quite like you. All of those things are great. And I think most people would agree with having hiring practices that try to take out any kind of implicit bias or anything like that, as long as at the end of that hiring process, the primary goal is a meritocratic system where the absolute best person, regardless of anything about them, gets the job that is up. So how should we think about this? Because as Christians, certainly we should be on the front line of pushing for diversity of experience, diversity in our churches, diversity in the kingdom of God. We should be the most inclusive people of all time. Jesus came and he accepted all of us broken, jacked up sinners. And we should push for equality. As a matter of fact, it was the gospel, the person of Jesus, and the movement that he started that raise the level of equality among people of different races, genders, and classes like nothing else has in the entire history of humanity. In Acts chapter 10, it says, "Then Peter began to speak. I now realize how true it is that God does not show favoritism, but accepts from every nation the one who fears him and who does what is right." Here's the background. Peter believed that Israel was favored by God due to their heritage. However, God showed him there was true equality among mankind, and acceptance was based on their decision to accept or to reject God. Peter was a proud Hebrew man, and he believed that they were God's people and nobody else was. And he started seeing God does not show favoritism. This is a system where everyone has equal opportunity to look at the sacrifice of Jesus and put their faith in it. And by that, they are brought into the family of God. There is great evidence all throughout Scripture that we are expected to take the life that we have been given and not to be shown favoritism based on someone trying to hit some kind of quota, but based on the work that we've done. One of the most startling of these examples is the parable of the talents in Matthew chapter 25. The parable of the talent says it's like a man about to go on a journey. He called his servants and entrusted his possessions to them. To one he gave 5 talents, to another 2, and to another 1 talent, depending on each one's ability. And then he went away on a journey. There are so many things interesting about this. Number one is not everyone got the same amount of talent because people are different and people have different capacity and people have shown levels of different responsibility. He gives each a different amount based on that person's ability. At the end of the parable, he comes back and expects a return. And the person with 5 talents brought 5 more. And the person with 2 talents brought 2 more. And both of them were rewarded equally because even though they were different people with different experience and different capabilities, the expectation was the same. With what you have been given, you are expected to invest it wisely during your time on earth, and you will be rewarded based on the work you've done. That's meritocracy. The last person did nothing with the talent he was given and was therefore punished for it. Here's what Paul said to the Thessalonians. In fact, when we were with you, this is what we commanded you. If anyone isn't willing to work, he should not eat. Here's the problem with DEI. Manufactured equity, forcing quotas, giving people positions that they're not as qualified for as other people. Manufactured equity creates further discrimination. The thing we're trying to avoid, allegedly, manufactured equity creates further discrimination. Truly pursuing equality creates diversity and inclusion organically. And if you don't believe that, then you might need to check your own biases. if we just uphold the laws that are already on the books and we reward organizations that have a true meritocratic system where we're looking at all people regardless of demographics and rewarding the people who are best fit for the job, then pursuing actual equality, it will create diversity and inclusion organically. And if you don't believe that, then it means you think that someone who is either from a minority ethnicity or someone of a certain gender or someone who grew up in a certain class setting, that you think that they might not be as naturally gifted as others. And that is an actual bias. People truly just trying to be equitable and meritocratic don't have that bias. You can almost count on having true, robust diversity if you focus on equality. And I think that MetaChurch, where I'm the lead pastor, is evidence of that. We believe that our mission is the most important mission in the world. And so when we go to hire staff members to help us organize this movement, my only goal is to get the absolute best person possible. And that focus on equality of opportunity and a meritocratic system of bringing in the most robust dynamic leaders possible has created diversity without us having to try. And our full-time staff, we have 5 men and we have 5 women. We have 5 white people and 5 non-white people. And when you start looking at our Sunday-only staff members or our part-time staff members, the white employees are in the minority pretty significantly. And we should be, not because of equity, because that looks like the city that we're in. That looks like our side of town. And so we're hiring from that side of town, and diversity takes care of itself. I'll give you another example. I was at a pastor's luncheon, and there were some white pastors, and this was right in the thick of 2020, 2021, and they were just lamenting the lack of diversity, ethnic diversity in their congregation. I mean, just almost weeping and gnashing of teeth. And finally, I asked where their church is, and their church is in a small pocket of our area that is about 85+% white. Their church looks exactly like their area. They're reaching the people who live in a 5-mile radius of their church's building. They're doing what they're supposed to be doing. And instead of just becoming like completely enamored with the idea of punishing ourselves for not hitting some kind of quota God didn't ask us to hit, we should focus on the work of ministry. And if you're a believer, you should focus on being as healthy as you possibly can be and as effective as you possibly can be. And as churches, we should preach the gospel, because in the history of humankind, it is the gospel uniquely that has created the diversity to bring together all people. Paul said to the Galatians, there now is no slave or free, Jew or Greek, male or female. We are all one in Christ Jesus. So focus on the gospel of Jesus Christ, and the rest will take care of itself. If you enjoyed this clip, make sure you check out the full podcast and subscribe and hit the notification bell to stay up to date with all new content. You can also support the channel at patreon.com/Clayton Tyner. Link is in the description below.